Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started on a quiet afternoon, the kind of day when sunlight filters softly through the curtains and the house feels unusually still. I was getting ready for a small family dinner, nothing fancy, just something simple. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the rustle of fabric as I tried to zip up my dress. But the zipper got stuck halfway, and no matter how much I tried, it wouldn't move. I let out a small sigh, half frustrated, half embarrassed that I couldn't manage something so simple. That's when he walked in, calm, unbothered, his usual quiet self. He froze for a second when he saw me struggling, then asked softly if I needed help. I hesitated. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was the awkwardness of the moment, but before I could say no, he was already standing behind me. The room suddenly felt warmer, the silence heavier. I could hear his breath, slow and uncertain, as his fingers reached for the zipper. There was nothing inappropriate about it, not really, but something about the closeness, the stillness, made time slow down. His fingers brushed against my back by accident, and I felt my heartbeat stumble. Neither of us said a word. The zipper moved up, smooth this time, but his hands stayed there for just a second longer than they needed to. Long enough for both of us to notice. When I turned around, he was looking at me differently, not the casual look you give someone you see every day, but one that lingered just a little too long, like he was seeing something for the first time. It was innocent, but the air between us changed. He stepped back quickly, pretending nothing had happened, but the silence that followed said everything. I smiled, trying to break the tension, and thanked him like it was just a small favor. But his hands were still trembling slightly, and he didn't say a word. He just stood there, frozen, confused, caught between what he felt and what he knew was right. And in that small moment, something unspoken passed between us, a strange mix of curiosity, guilt, and something neither of us wanted to name. The kind of moment that changes how you look at someone forever, even if you pretend it didn't happen. Before I could say anything more, someone knocked on the door from downstairs, calling our names. The sound snapped everything back to normal. He stepped aside quickly, avoiding my eyes, and walked out without another word. But I could still feel the warmth of his presence, the quiet weight of everything we didn't say. Have you ever found yourself in a moment that wasn't supposed to mean anything, but somehow, it did? A small accident that changed the way you saw someone forever? Tell me what you think in the comments. Should moments like this be forgotten, or do they always come back when you least expect them? The rest of the evening passed in a blur, though I tried to act as if nothing unusual had happened. Dinner was quiet, almost too quiet. Every time I glanced across the table, he was already looking away, pretending to be focused on his plate or his phone. The soft clinking of cutlery filled the silence that used to be filled with laughter and small talk. Something between us had changed, subtle, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. After everyone went to bed, I found myself replaying the moment in my mind, the way his hand hesitated, the way his eyes shifted when he realized how close we were. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just my imagination. But then again, some moments feel too real to be accidents. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. The house was bright again, filled with the usual weekend noise of footsteps, voices, the smell of coffee. He was in the kitchen, fixing something by the counter when I walked in. For a second, we both froze like the day before. Then he smiled politely, as if last night had never happened. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice casual but a little too careful. I nodded, and he handed me a cup. Our fingers brushed for just a moment, but it was enough to bring back that quiet tension, that strange awareness neither of us wanted to admit. I thanked him softly and looked away, pretending to check my phone. The day went on like that, small talk, short glances, polite smiles. Everything looked normal on the outside, but every time we were in the same room, there was this invisible pull. It wasn't about words or gestures, it was something deeper, something we both felt but couldn't explain. Later that evening, I was folding laundry in the living room when he walked in again, holding a small box. "The cabinet in the hallway is loose," he said. "Thought I'd fix it before it breaks." I nodded, grateful for the distraction. But as he knelt down to work, I couldn't help noticing how different he seemed now, quieter, more focused, but distant in a way that made me curious. He didn't talk much, just kept working, his brows furrowed slightly. I watched him for a while, wondering if he was avoiding the topic or waiting for me to bring it up. The silence between us felt almost alive. At one point, he looked up and caught me staring. For a second, neither of us looked away. It wasn't awkward, just intense, like both of us were searching for something to say but couldn't find the right words. Then, just as quickly, he dropped his gaze and stood up, saying the cabinet was fixed. He walked out quietly, leaving me alone with a racing heart and 1,000 questions. What was he thinking? Did he feel the same tension I did, or was I just imagining it all? The days that followed were filled with small moments that felt heavier than they should have. Every ordinary thing, breakfast, passing in the hallway, the sound of footsteps on the stairs, carried a quiet tension that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. It was as if the air between us had changed, and no matter how much we tried to act normal, the silence said more than words ever could. He started spending more time outside, running errands, fixing things around the house. I told myself it was just coincidence, but I noticed how he avoided being alone with me for too long. Yet, there were times when I caught him looking, a quick glance that disappeared the moment I met his eyes. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't innocent either. One afternoon, while everyone was out, the rain started pouring heavily. The sound echoed through the house, steady and calming. I sat by the window with a book, trying not to think too much. Then I heard footsteps, quiet, hesitant. He walked into the room holding a towel, his hair damp from the rain. "Power's out," he said softly, glancing at the dim light from the window. I nodded, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. He sat across from me, watching the rain, both of us lost in our thoughts. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was something else, like a calm before something we couldn't name. He finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "Things have felt different lately," he said, not looking directly at me. My heart skipped. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I asked if he was okay. He smiled faintly and said, "Yeah, just trying to figure things out." Then he changed the subject, talking about something ordinary, work, errands, anything to steer away from the truth hanging between us. Later that evening, the power came back, and everything returned to normal, at least on the surface. But his words stayed with me. What was he trying to figure out? Was he feeling the same confusion I was trying so hard to ignore? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering when everything had started to shift. Was it the moment he helped me with the dress, or had it been building quietly all along, hidden beneath years of normalcy? The story was no longer about a single moment. It was about everything that came after, the glances, the pauses, the quiet distance that kept growing while pulling us closer at the same time. The following week felt heavier than usual. Every conversation had pauses that lingered too long, and every shared glance seemed to carry a weight neither of us could bear to name. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, almost invisible, but underneath that silence was something building, something that couldn't stay hidden forever. He had been distant lately, leaving early and coming home late. When he was around, he seemed restless, like he was trying to outrun his own thoughts. I tried to act like nothing was wrong, but the truth was, I felt the distance more than I wanted to admit. The connection that once felt new and uncertain now felt like a secret neither of us knew how to carry. One evening, I was cleaning the living room when I noticed his jacket still hanging by the door. The sound of rain outside brought me back to that day when we had sat together in silence. The memory lingered, the look in his eyes, the uncertainty, the way the air seemed to hold its breath. It was the same feeling now, only stronger. The power flickered again, just like before, and I found myself walking toward the window. The street was empty, dark except for the faint glow of headlights in the distance. I didn't hear him come in, but when I turned around, he was standing there, quiet, unsure, just watching me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The storm outside matched the storm inside my chest. His expression was different this time, not distant, not guarded, just honest. I could tell he had something to say, but he hesitated, the words caught somewhere between reason and emotion. "I didn't mean for things to feel strange," he said finally, his voice low. "I just didn't know how to act anymore." I wanted to answer, to tell him that I understood, but my voice wouldn't come out. There was too much unspoken between us, too many things that didn't fit into simple explanations. The silence stretched on, the kind that makes time feel slower. I took a small step forward, almost without thinking. He didn't move, just watched, like he was torn between stepping closer or walking away. The room felt smaller somehow, the sound of rain louder, the air warmer. The tension between what we felt and what we couldn't say filled every corner. It wasn't about words anymore, it was about what was left unsaid. Then, the lights flickered once more, and everything fell into shadow. For a split second, I could only hear his breath, close enough to feel. And in that darkness, every thought, every hesitation, every quiet moment from before seemed to collide all at once. What happened next would change everything, but in that heartbeat of silence, the story was still suspended, waiting for one of us to decide what came next. The storm outside finally began to calm, but inside, the silence still thundered between us. The power had gone out completely now, leaving the room lit only by flashes of lightning from the window. For a long moment, we didn't move. It was as if both of us were waiting for the other to break the silence, to make sense of what was happening, but neither did. Then, a sound broke through the quiet, the sudden ring of a phone from the hallway table. He turned away quickly, almost startled. The moment between us shattered like glass. He reached for the phone, his voice low as he answered, but his tone changed instantly. "What?" "When," he said, his face tightening. Whatever he heard on the other end pulled him somewhere far away. He hung up and turned toward me. "I need to go," he said, his voice steady but rushed. "It's something I have to deal with." And before I could ask what was wrong, he grabbed his jacket and left into the rain. The door closed behind him, leaving me standing in the dim light, my heart still racing from everything that almost happened, and now from what might be happening somewhere else. The air still carried the weight of what was unsaid, but now there was something new, worry. I didn't know where he was going, or why his expression had changed so suddenly, but I knew it wasn't nothing. Hours passed before I finally heard the sound of the door again. He came back soaked, pale, and quiet. His hands trembled slightly as he took off his jacket. I asked what happened, but he just shook his head. "It's complicated," he murmured. "Someone from before showed up, someone I didn't expect to see again. That was the twist I didn't see coming. Someone from his past, someone who suddenly appeared right when everything between us was shifting. I didn't know who she was, but the way he said her name later, softly, almost regretfully, told me enough. Her name was Emily. He said they had known each other years ago, and she was back in town because of something urgent. I didn't ask too many questions, though part of me wanted to. The look in his eyes told me that whatever history they shared still lingered somewhere deep. The following days were strange. He was around, but distant. He spoke less, smiled less, like his thoughts were always somewhere else. I tried to focus on normal things, work, routines, anything to quiet the unease growing inside me, but it didn't work. The quiet moments that used to feel full now felt hollow. One afternoon, I saw them outside, him and Emily. They were talking near his car, and even from a distance, I could tell it wasn't casual. He looked troubled, she looked emotional. They spoke for a few minutes before he drove away, leaving her standing there. When he came home later, he avoided my eyes. I didn't ask where he had been, but I knew. The tension that had once been about unspoken feelings was now tangled with uncertainty and something that felt a lot like jealousy. That night, as I lay awake listening to the rain return, one thought wouldn't leave my mind: maybe every connection comes with a shadow from the past. Maybe some stories aren't just about what's happening now, but about everything that came before. The next morning, the air in the house felt different, heavier, stiller, like something had finally reached its breaking point. I found him sitting on the porch, staring out at the street, a cup of untouched coffee in his hands. The storm had passed, but the sky still carried traces of gray. For a moment, I just watched him quietly, unsure if I should say anything. When I finally spoke, my voice came out softer than I intended. "You've been quiet lately." He looked up, and for the first time in days, he didn't try to hide behind a polite smile. "I didn't mean to be," he said. "It's just, everything's been a lot." I nodded. "Is it about her?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sighed and set the cup down. "Emily came back because her father's sick. She needed help settling things. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to sound like an excuse. But I also didn't want you to think I was hiding something." His words felt honest, maybe too honest. The tension that had been growing between us for weeks suddenly shifted into something fragile and real. I sat beside him, and for a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time. It felt like both of us were trying to breathe again after holding it in too long. "I didn't plan for any of this," he said quietly. "But that day, when I helped you with your dress, something changed for me. I just didn't know what to do with it." The truth in his voice hit me harder than I expected. There was no pretending anymore, no hiding behind moments that didn't mean anything. Everything we had been avoiding was finally out in the open. But before I could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted us. I turned and saw Emily stepping out, holding an envelope. She looked nervous but determined. He stood immediately, walking toward her. I stayed where I was, watching as she handed him the letter. She said something I couldn't hear, but I saw his expression change: surprise, then confusion. He opened the envelope and read silently before looking up, his face pale. Later, when he came back inside, he told me what it was. Emily wasn't just back to see her father, she had discovered something that connected him to her family in ways he never knew. His late mother had once worked for Emily's family, and there was an inheritance issue that tied them together unexpectedly. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper, something that explained the strange timing, the emotional weight he'd been carrying. For the first time, everything made sense. The distance, the confusion, even the silence. But just as things began to settle, he looked at me and said quietly, "This might change everything." And that's where the story turned again, because sometimes, the truth doesn't bring closure. It just opens another door. When the truth finally came out, everything that once felt heavy began to feel lighter. It didn't erase the tension or the complicated emotions that had built up, but it brought clarity, something we both needed. The inheritance issue with Emily's family turned out to be more than just money. It revealed a past connection neither of us had known existed. His mother had once worked for Emily's father, and years later, an old promise about that work resurfaced. It explained why Emily returned and why he seemed so torn between the past and the present. After everything settled, we sat down one evening, quiet but calm. There was no storm, no power flickering, just a soft sunset through the window and the sound of life moving forward. He looked at me and said, "I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know what to do when everything started feeling different." I smiled faintly. Sometimes feelings don't ask for permission. They just happen. We didn't need to say more. Whatever had started between us had changed both of us, maybe not into something easy, but into something real. The truth about Emily didn't divide us. Instead, it reminded us that every person carries a story deeper than what's seen on the surface. As days turned into weeks, the tension that once filled the air began to fade. Life returned to a rhythm, calm, quiet, but not the same. Something had shifted permanently, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet understanding that some people enter your life to make you see things differently, about love, about timing, about honesty. In the end, there was no grand confession, no perfect ending, just two people who learned that not every connection is meant to be defined, and not every story needs a label. Some just leave a mark, gentle but lasting.